Hi friends, welcome back to Self Productions. This is part 2. I unfortunately had to stop the video earlier because I had to go out for an appointment. Those of you who understand alternative brains, if you know, you know. Anyway, I'm back now, and where we stopped was I was defining what our shadow is before we get into the why. And you have to kind of understand what you're dealing with here, okay? So essentially, the shadow is that part of us. It's a collection of parts that lurk just below the surface, subconscious, influencing every moment of our lives, right? So that's one aspect. It is not just one insecurity we have, it's heaps and heaps of alternative things in our lives and experiences that lurk in the background and really drives our decision making. Two, right, the basis of our attachment, or the shadow is really the basis of our attachment style, which is the lens through which we see the world and a fundamental component of ourselves. Then the third most important part of what shadow is that it is the part of ourselves that subtly shifts our perspective, so it has influence over what we do and how we do it, right? Everything from the partners we choose, our careers, etc. I would say that very early, people first get introduced into somewhat a perspective of shadow work when you're doing SWOT analysis on yourself, or you do an aptitude test or an entrance exam or some kind of behavioral tests. Most people get a glimpse of their so-called weaknesses or what they're hiding in those kind of sessions, right? But it really comes up for us, I think, in a lot of the discomfort and gnarliness we feel and experience as we go through life, right? And then we have to kind of figure out, like, if it makes us feel so crap, what's the benefit of it? Well, the single most amazing benefit of doing shadow work is the concept of integrating, right? It's integrating the parts of you may have pushed down or away due to social norms and other influences. We get to understand, we acknowledge and become aware of those parts of ourselves. Shadow work offers deep insights and opportunity to grow in wisdom and connection with others, right? If we understand our attachment style, it is one of the most liberating personal information that we could ever have. In fact, before I continue on, I'm just going to quickly define what attachment styles are. So you have secure attachment. These are individuals with secure attachment, feel comfortable with intimacy and dependence. They can trust others and be trusted, forming stable and satisfying relationships. Anxious attachment, once again, it's people with anxious attachment crave closeness but worry about abandonment. They may seek frequent reassurance and validation from their partners. Avoidant attachment are those with avoidant attachment tend to be emotionally unavailable, preferring independence and suppressing their needs of closeness. They might fear intimacy and push others away. Disorganized attachment is a style that combines traits of both anxious and avoidant attachment. Individuals with disorganized attachment may exhibit unpredictable behaviors such as trust and intimacy. So those are attachment styles. I have noted that it depends. There is a lot in our decision making that drives our attachment styles, and it's the single biggest impact on our relationships and how successful or unsuccessful they are. What I'm trying to drive at is that sometimes people tend to label the other when a relationship fails, like, oh, they are borderline personality, they are narcissist, they are extra, they are so and so, When at the end of the day, if you just sit back and you reflect a little bit, and then you can very quickly discern that no, it's actually just a difference of behavioral styles and attachment styles. So let's move on with our shadow work and understanding that. So learning the impact of the shadow on your life would result in the ability for you to forgive, be compassionate, and develop wisdom to move on from hurts, harms, and pains. So now that you understand that, it's really a very fancy way to say that we learn to let go with a sense of dignity, pride, which results in an inner acceptance of who we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So this work is very difficult. It will be very, very uncomfortable, and this is why in now part one of this particular talk, we had to, we had to go through the warning on what shadow work could do. Okay, it could be really very impactful, and sometimes we need support to process. Okay, so this workbook will prompt you to dig deep into your psyche or your unconscious, right? At bringing what's to light in your understanding, your personality, past, and nature, and bring all of that to light. Therefore, make certain that you have systems in place to help the process. This is deep work. And we're going to continue on to the archetypes, which is also the basis for understanding deep work in a little bit. But first, let's just check in if we understand what the shadow is. Okay, the shadow is all of those feelings, emotions that arrived after some kind of experience during our formative years. That could be anything from neglect, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, any kind of complex traumatic experience we may have had. And for some, it may not have been an experience like that. It just may have been instances where we've been incredibly shamed or embarrassed, okay? Or instances where, at no fault of our own, we got into some kind of trouble. And just carrying that kind of shame with you at all times becomes, quite frankly, dangerous, okay? If you are carrying heavy weight on a backpack that you should not be carrying, that is also a definition of madness. It is exactly what they say. Like if you do the same things over and over and you expect a different result, not gonna happen, not gonna work. Anyway, that's essentially what our shadow is. And doing shadow work is like taking off that backpack, putting it down on the floor, unlocking it, unzipping it, and saying, whatever is in this bag, I'm gonna pick it up. I'm going to try to understand it, try to figure out where it comes from, and maybe if I don't have to hold it onto it, I can just send it back to where it came from. Okay? Maybe if it is something that is innately mine, right? Because there are things that happen that's completely out of control. Some of those things would drive by a decision we made, a mistake. Right? We're not saying that every mistake you made is directly a result of your shadow. No, sometimes we could have had the best intentions, but the people we are dealing with were just that skillful at being manipulative. Anyway, back to the bag analogy. I always love to equate doing shadow work to going on a hike and backpacking with this humongously heavy bag. In order for us to reach summit, we need to be light and we need to be able to adjust, right? And the higher we go, the more important it is for us to pay attention to our breathing. Our breathing is at the basis and the core of every shadow work session. And that's essentially where we're going to get to. Once we get the technical definitions out of the way and we start our practice, which is very fun and entertaining. That's where we're going to be focusing on things like, for example, our breath work. It's really very important because remember, as you're ascending the mountain, oxygen, your oxygen decreases, right? The higher you go, the more constricting you can feel. The further you fall, the more mistakes matter. Okay, so we just have to remember that. And then some of us are natural climbers. This is just what we do. Nothing in the world and no one can change that or take that away from you. So going back to our shadow, it being a collection of the parts that we have long denied. We have spoken about our attachment styles. And then we have to kind of understand what our triggers are too, right? Because triggers, those are the emotional and irrational aspects of our psyche. Because the influence of the shadow can be subtle, from the kind of clothes we wear to the career we choose and the friends we choose. Within those spaces, right, we could also have emotional or irrational triggers leading to things like maybe food, due to food insecurity, develop some kind of eating disorder, right? So what is the trigger for this eating disorder? Maybe it's food insecurity. Okay, the next part of this is, what about your emotional and irrational triggers? How about the sense of jealousy or envy, or when you feel the most embarrassed and ashamed and you just want to curl up into yourself and hide away from the world, right? What's making you afraid of other human beings, right? What took away your sense of trust? Why can you no longer be vulnerable in the world? And why do I have to wear shades on my own podcast? Well, maybe I'll answer that question in the very next one. But remember, like most things in life, there's some symbols attached to almost everything we encounter. And maybe me wearing shades is symbolic of some shady shit. Who knows? Either way, we're going to have a great time on this podcast. Once again, thank you to my very special friend Z for the loan on your shades. I love them. You look way better in them. I just am borrowing them because for some reason I keep losing my sunglasses. So I guess it's something it's gonna come up in our conversations in future episodes. But once again, I would like to say I love you deeply. Thank you very, very much for supporting me and my work, and thank you for joining me on this part of evaluating Zachary Phillips's Shadow Work journal, in which we discover the truth and become calm. Be brave, be you.